Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. This is Book Passage, Conversations with Authors, and we are so happy to have you joining in our Zoom call here. To those of you who have participated before, welcome back. We're happy that you're going to spend the hour with us. If you're new, well, welcome. We hope that you will continue to participate in these amazing conversations that we have. You subscribe to our YouTube channel and just take a look at our website. We are here to serve all your book needs. And Book Passage has two locations. We have our store in Corte Madera, and we also have our beautiful store in the Ferry Building, and both stores are open. They're open 7 days a week. So you can come in and browse for your books. You can order on our website, and you can also call us on the phone, and we will actually answer the phone in person and help you purchase books that way. So again, thank you so much for joining us. As the program continues, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, and the authors will be happy to take a look at those and answer your questions. So we are thrilled to have two amazing authors with us today. But before we actually start that, I just want to mention some of the really exciting upcoming events that we have, because we have a very active summer and fall schedule filled with both in-store events, online events, and even events in big venues. So we have an in-person event with Jan Wenner and Ben Fong Torres of Rolling Stones magazine fame. And they will be at Dominican University on Wednesday, September 21st at 7 p.m. And they will be discussing Jan's new memoir, Like a Rolling Stone. We also have an event with Congressman Adam Schiff, and he will be in person at our Corte Madera store on Thursday, August 18th at 12 noon. This will be a meet and greet. You can meet him, you can ask him questions, you can have your book signed, and you can take photos with him. So tickets to these amazing events are still available. They are on our website. Take a look at our calendar. We do not want you to miss any of the wonderful author events and classes that we have going on at Book Passage. And as many of you know, Book Passage has been a Bay Area institution for over 40 years. Our mission is to enrich, engage, and inspire. And thank you to all for all your loyalty. Because of that, we have been able to serve you for so many years, and we hope to continue to be around for another 40 years. Well, we are thrilled this evening to present an incredible new gripping novel. Set in London's gritty gay scene at the end of the Thatcher era, Alec Scott's debut novel, Until It Shimmers, confronts faith, honor, and the pursuit of love. This book has received rave reviews, and at Book Passage, we are very proud to display it on our shelves. Alec Scott is a Canadian writer. He currently lives in Oakland. He's a former barrister. He has worked as an editor and columnist at Toronto Life magazine and a producer at the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. Now, since moving to the Bay Area, his work has been featured in The Guardian, Los Angeles Times, the San Francisco Chronicle, magazines including Sunset, Sierra, and the Smithsonian. He has taught writing at Stanford. He's an avid traveler. He's gone on assignment all over the world, and his stories have won many awards. And he will be at our Travel Writers Conference coming up towards the end of this month. You can meet him in person if you want to participate in that. We are very happy to help him launch his debut novel here at Book Passage. And Alec is joined this evening by Gordy Slack. And Gordy is also an Oakland-based science writer. His books include The Battle Over the Meaning of Everything, Science and the Spiritual Quest. And both these titles are also available at Book Passage. He has written for The New Scientist, Discover, Wired, and the New York Times. He also writes about science, health, technology for Stanford, Kaiser Permanente, and UC Berkeley. And so you have probably seen some of his work. So it is a great honor and a privilege to welcome to our virtual Book Passage stage, Alec Scott and Gordy Slack. Welcome.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thanks so much, Cheryl. This one is Gordy, and it's such a pleasure to be here to introduce my friend and colleague, Alec Scott, and his wonderful, shiny new novel, Until It Shimmers. After I do that, Alec is going to read a few selections from the book, and then we'll talk a little bit before opening the discussion to questions from you, which you can submit through the chat function there. Alec is pretty well known for his award-winning magazine pieces, but less commonly known about him is that he had a previous life practicing media and aviation law for years in Canada, where he was born and remains a citizen, I think. Don't you, Alec? Yeah. Yes. Realizing that the law wasn't exactly his cup of tea, he made a radical career jump and joined the staff of Toronto Life magazine, where he covered the arts and found his tribe. That's us, as he puts it. I like to think the expressive, passionate, word-loving weirdos he found in journalism are a more compatible fit for him than the button-down barristers were, but I don't know. Since coming to the San Francisco Bay Area in 2010, as Cheryl said, he's written about all kinds of things: Silicon Valley, design, sports, business, books, music, movies, travel, food. His work is just super diverse, as are the publications that print it. But one thing all of his wide-ranging pieces share is how well built, vivid, and fun they are to read. For about 6 years, Alex and I have shared a suite of rundown offices in downtown Oakland with an extraordinary group of writers and radio people. And of the many, many lovable things about the place, one of the best for me has been getting to know Alec. Such a surprising, talented, and attentive writer, a radical gentleman, and a true friend. There's a lot more I could say about what Alec has done, but we're here to celebrate his latest achievement with the book, Until It Shimmers. He's become a novelist, and a really fine one. So I just want to say congratulations, Alec, on this great book and on all the great reviews you've already earned.
Thank you, Gordy. That's fantastic. I love working with you and having met you through that. That also a real highlight. So, and before I forget, I want to thank David, my fellow, without whom I couldn't have written this, and Book Passage, which I love, the Petruccellis, Elaine and Catherine, and Karen and Zach and Cheryl for this evening. So yeah, and welcome you guys who we can't see you, so we're just speaking into the ether, and but really happy whoever is there, and we're not going to be doing any music, although I might sing a few passages, sort of switching gears into cabaret artistry, but it's not a good idea to play music to which you don't own the copyright. To which you have no color of right over YouTube, so we're not going to do that, and I don't think my sung versions will be identifiable by any algorithm. So yeah. The book is a coming of age story, a book about the pursuit of love, about finding your place in the world. And Ned is a young Canadian. He moves to London to do that, to sort of get out from under his a setting that sometimes feels too tight to him, and he takes a couple jobs to figure out what he's going to do professionally, one in publishing and one at a law firm. And the first scene I was hoping to read is the day before he heads to London. He's walking along the shore of Lake Ontario in his hometown, Oakville, which is a bedroom community just west of Toronto. He's doing so with his English mother, Helena, and she moved to Canada with his father, who is a Canadian. They both met when they were studying at Cambridge. And it was not a shotgun marriage, but it was a speedy one. Her mother had died. She wanted out from her home for various reasons. And Oliver comforted her. Her name's Helena. His name's Oliver. Very British and very Canadian names. And he comforted her after the death of her mother, and surprised, I think, himself when he ended up proposing marriage to her. And then she surprised both of them by saying yes. And so this is the product of their marriage, Ned, their oldest, walking with Helena along the lakeshore in Oakville, And he's interested in what love looks like and what it doesn't. And so he asked his mom some slightly invasive questions, beginning with, here we go. With Dad, how did you know that he was more than just an escape? Ned asked. We got to Toronto, Helena said. He told his parents we were arriving later, and so we had a couple of days to ourselves before the solace in that. Though, of course, they had greater challenges than I did. Not having the language necessarily, not having a Canadian, not having Oliver to help them. Yes, yes, Ned said. You've told us about the symphony. Of course I have, she said. I'm reaching that age where you don't even remember when you're repeating yourself. Have I told you about the market? No, Ned said. I suppose I want to keep that for myself. So on our little honeymoon, your father shows me that market, the St. Lawrence. I remember watching the lobsters in their big glass case, sharing a silly old story I'd read about a French poet who kept one as a pet and walked it around the parks of Paris on a leash. When asked why, he said he liked how quiet the lobster was and also that it knew the secrets of the deep. This had always somehow amused me, and I was so relieved when it did him too. So much easier to read when you can hear reactions, but anyway, and I'm not relying on you, Gordy, to provide all of them. So Ned smiled at his mother. He also found the anecdote a little daffy, sweet. He too liked it for reasons that weren't easy to fathom. And then Helena went on. He took me to the Toronto Islands and annotated the skyline as we looked back at the city. It was much smaller then. There was no CN Tower, the needle puncturing the sky. Ned remembered when a Sikorsky helicopter lowered the top of the tower into place. Certainly, Helena said, Toronto was no London then. Your father pointed at the building where his family's firm had its head office, that old bank building with these somber stone kings at each corner looking down on us. And no, he didn't mean to work there. There was the railway hotel with the green copper roof where we were staying. Above us, the cottonwood trees were shedding their spores, and there was all this white fluff in his hair. He said it was summer snow. And then he took me by the hands and turned me away from the city and towards him. And he said, I'm so happy you've come. It was formal, the sort of thing you'd say to someone as they came in the door at a big party. But it was just right. I might have spooked if he'd said something more than that. I thought, do you know, somehow I've landed in the clover. And I had. I fell for him that day and for the lake as we walked by it. I asked if we could live near it, and he said, yes, we could. And we did. We do. Ned and Helen looked out at the same lake together. The waves were growing, whipped up by a wind that had grown markedly more bitter in their few minutes outside. Some cold rain began to spit down on them. So then you knew, Ned said. Yes, then I knew. But what a gamble, the great gamble of my life, she said, taking and squeezing Ned's arm as they walked east along the lakeshore. And how it has paid off with you, your brother Henry, with everything. She removed his arm from his and turned towards him. I do hope you're as lucky as I was. I have to admit, it worries me, this country-bred girl that I am, that you're heading to London, this big, rather bad city. People can get lost there, especially people who aren't so practical as they might be. Are you saying I'm impractical? Ned said with a smile. Your head's in a cloud most of the time. You come by that honestly, alas, one of your inheritances from me, tête dans la lune, what my French mistress used to say to me. London is not always kind to people like you. This was Ned's worry also, that he'd get lost in London. He'd never even rented an apartment before. In his dorm room in Trinity, in the run-up to exams, he'd repeatedly played a new album by one of his favorite bands, the Smiths. Good times for a change. See the luck I've had can make a good man turn bad. So please, 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 let me get what I want. Lord knows it would be the first time. Helena's voice brought him back to the lakeside. Oh, Ned, why are you going away? There are publishing companies here, law firms too. I know, Mom, Ned said. I have to. I want to. I mean, I don't want to also. But you'll come over. Yes, she said, we will be over. If it's not too soon, we'll come this fall. And you'll be back for Christmas, I hope. So you haven't come out from Toronto terribly often these last couple of years. He was studying in Toronto. Haven't we been good parents? Yes, he said with conviction. Yes, you have. You just never know what it is someone needs. She looked down at the muddy path beneath her feet. She took his arm and turned him toward her. There's nothing you want to say to me? No, Mom, he said. I mean, yes, but no. You know you can. So that's the first. That's introducing Helena. It's a book about a mother and son and the rest of the family, a pretty conventional family, a bit over their heads as a result of the scene I'm just about to read. The parents do come to London for a visit, and lucky you get a little more singing from me. And I don't think the powers that be at YouTube have taken it down yet. But so this is an Arlo Guthrie song that was something of a family anthem in my family, and unfortunately, I've taken it and made use of it, my own use of it. So it's the City of New Orleans, not written by Arlo, but he made it famous. So, riding on the City of New Orleans, Illinois Central, Monday morning rail, 15 cars and 15 restless riders, 3 conductors, 25 sacks of mail. All along the southbound Odyssey, the train pulls out of Kentucky, rolls along past houses, farms, and fields, passing trains that have no name, freight yards full of old black men, and the graveyards of the rusted automobiles. Here's the part you probably know. Good morning, America, how are you? Say, don't you know me? I'm your native son. I'm the train they call the City of New Orleans. I'll be gone 500 miles when the day is done. So this passage leads towards that song. So you'll know I've hit the limit, and then we're going to do some. Gordy and I are going to have some a chat after that. And so this is Ned's in London. He's working at a publishing house. He's planned to come out to them on their visit, but he just keeps putting it off. And on their last night after dinner, he asks if he can take a car ride with them back to the rental place that they're staying in. So here we go. Oliver and Helena got in the front of the rented Vauxhall, and Ned sat in the back, taking out the A to Z to help them traverse London from Chelsea to the edge of the city to get to the house they had rented. It was a National Trust property, one of the only houses to survive the Great Fire of London. His mother filled the silence. When a man is bored of London, he is bored with life. We were always within striking distance of London. The morning train would get us in for the day, but like most country people, we seldom came in. When we did come in, we stuck to our rounds, to the devils we knew, Liberties, the Army and Navy, Heels. Of course, the Blitz had leveled so much of it. Londoners had survived the Great Fire, had come through the Blitz. Why couldn't he find his way to speak of this comparatively small thing? Helena carried on. The city, it seemed daunting somehow. Samuel Johnson, the board line, not mine. I know, Mum. Remember that English degree? He pushed his fingernails deep into the rental car's seats. They swung past Cleopatra's Needle and swooped along the embankment. Swags of fairy light festooned along the edge of the Thames. How cheery, he thought. He directed his father to drive northwards, away from the river. This time it was Oliver who minded the gap in the conversation. This was before you were born, Ned, Oliver said, when your mother first brought me over and we came to see Aunt Cordelia. When we walked down her street at the appointed time, we looked up, and there she was, cleaning the windows in her petticoats. I wasn't sure quite what to say when I met her, so I made the mistake of admiring one of her paintings. A print, Helena said, an illustration for Hogarth's The Rake's Progress. Whatever, he said, and she took it from the wall and gave it to me. Silence descended on them again. Ned wanted to stay in this moment, hearing the usual stories told in the usual way. Helena finally turned towards Ned. What is it? You're not yourself. At last he began. When I dream, sometimes I have no hands. I don't really, sometimes I think of what it would be like to be gone. I know that's wrong. I never would. It's just What in the hell are you talking about, Oliver said, turning his head back to look at Ned. By then, they'd reached Oxford Street and were passing in front of Debenhams, the old department store where Ned bought his first suit. Oliver, Helena screamed. A black Audi had pulled from a side street in front of them. Oliver found the accelerator, not the brake, and the other car got bigger quickly, and 1 beat, 2 beats, wham. Their bodies hurtled forward, then were jerked backwards by their seatbelts. After a few moments, Oliver said, "Is everyone okay?" Helena nodded. "I'm gay," Ned said. "I've always been gay." The collision had jarred his confession loose. He couldn't believe he'd just blurted it out. "Oh God," Helena said, "just let your father deal with this." Oliver got out and exchanged insurance details with the driver. Helen and Ned didn't speak while Oliver managed the fallout from the crash. Ned could see his mother's trembling hand, but he didn't reach for it to hold it. He didn't cry. He just sat there numb and silent. He had done it, but what now? "Are you sure?" Helena said, finally, without turning. Oliver got back in the car. "Sorry," he said. "You shocked me, Ned. Can you be sure that you are?" Oliver turned around to face Ned when he put the question. "That's what I asked," Helena said, laying her hand on Oliver's. It was rare, such a display of solidarity. "Gay," Ned repeated. "Yes, I am. Gay. I'm gay." Each time he said the word, it depleted his reserves. "I've always known it." "I think you should stay over at this house with us tonight," Helena said, finally looking back at him. "I've been so worried about you. I knew something wasn't right. I told you so, didn't I, Oliver? You should see someone, talk to someone. Miles can recommend someone." Her brother was a doctor. People have changed. It just seems, she lost her train of thought. It seems to let you in for more of a tough time. And what about AIDS? Oliver didn't like that question. Ned knows how to look after himself, he said. Does he? She said, do you? Ned didn't know the answer to this question. Helena continued on. I just think being homosexual. She got the word out with difficulty, but soldiered on. They have such hard, lonely lives. It's not them, it's me, Ned said. Somehow he had suspected that his mother, for all her liberal views on women's issues and politics, for all her peals of laughter at the importance of being earnest, would have a hard time with his homosexuality. We love you, of course, Helen was saying. We'll always love you. But why would you choose that life, Ned? It's not a choice for most people, Mum. Believe me, if I had to choose, I wouldn't choose it. This didn't feel quite right. It felt too deep in Ned for him to imagine himself without it there. And so to choose against it was to be somehow not Ned, someone else. It's a choice. Everything's a choice, Helena said. The Greeks did both, had wives and male lovers. You marry, make an agreement, and that way you can have children. It occurred to Ned that this was not the thought of someone truly taken by surprise. This was an argument that had been nurtured, either consciously or not, readied against this day. Maybe for some people it's a choice, for me it's not. How could you tell us now, in this way, as we're about to head off tomorrow, just after a car crash, of all the awful things? Do we deserve this? No, you don't, Ned said. I'm so sorry. I saw the car coming towards us, we hit it, and then it just came out. But there was never going to be a good time. I don't want to lie anymore. I want to stop lying. It's late, Oliver said. Let's get back. We can talk things over in the morning. You must not take your own life. That dream was leading you astray. I would not recover. I would kill you if you did that, Helena said. They smiled a little at each other. Not a lot, but a little. With Ned's occasional guidance, Oliver drove the rest of the route, along High Holborn, past the sculptures of winged lions, over the viaduct, and into the old city of London. He parked the now battered vehicle next to the house they'd rented. Nearby was an old covered market, and some men were unloading vegetables from their trucks. Ned and his parents shambled up the crooked winding staircases of the old half-timbered house. Oliver offered them all a nightcap, but Ned had no further discussion in him. The next morning, they dropped the car at the rental agency near Heathrow. We're moving towards Arlo. Oliver gave them a thorough accident report while Helena and Ned sat silently nearby, her seething but trying not to, Ned scared. Just think how your father must feel, Helena said on the shuttle to the airport. I'm fine, Helena. I just want Ned to be careful of himself and his health. They checked their bags in. They reached the barrier. We love you, you know, she said, as if Ned had raised doubts on that head. Again, she couldn't bring herself to utter those three little words, I love you. We love you was a long distance from I love you. It may not seem like much in the catalog of mean remarks, but her next comment stung. It's just, Ned, I don't recognize you. You've changed. In a soft voice, he sang a snatch of a song to her. Say, don't you know me? I'm your native son. It was from an Arlo Guthrie song they'd all loved, his City of New Orleans, a celebration of the railway age, a lament for its passing. Surely this would elicit a smile from her, some acknowledgement of the years they'd spent together. Startled, she looked at Ned, really looked at him. It was like he had taken something of hers and she now wanted it back. After they left, he collapsed on the tube ride from Heathrow back to the city. It had gone just about as badly as it could possibly have gone. Still, this was London, and no, he did not intend to be bored. Thank you.
Oh, I love that passage, Alec. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
There is so much love in this book, in particular between the mom and Ned, even though theirs is the tension that really is, needs to be resolved in the book. And so much of the conflict is Ned trying to get approval from his mom and trying to explain who he is to her. But they also know each other better than they know anybody else. I mean, it's amazing to me that he got to be as old as he was without her knowing. And I guess you suggest in the passage that at some level, Helena must have known that Ned was gay and just had planned for him to deal with it in a different way. And
Sure.
I'm wondering, from our vantage point in 2022, how someone who loved someone else as much as Helena loved Ned could want that for him. I mean, how do you see that now? And I guess a way maybe of approaching that question is, if Ned, as a happy, successful, married 50-something-year-old person could go back and reassure Helena, what would he say to her?
Well, he'd say, I wanted to. He'd say, I've been lucky. I survived when many of my friends didn't. A lot of them died of AIDS. I survived when many of them sort of took their lives out of a lack of self-esteem, and the world changed on its axis. Like, as a result of people coming out, as a result of all the activism that I played a small role in, and as a result of all the lawyers, as a result of all the AIDS activists dying in on the streets, the world shifted, and it wasn't a given. Helena might have been right. He might have been throwing his life away at that point, as she saw it. The other thing was that Ned had been lying for a long time. He wanted to be the perfect son. He wanted to not have to become this gay person, even though he couldn't imagine, his imagination wasn't good enough to sort of imagine himself without it. But so they wanted the same thing, and both, I think, were fooling themselves a bit, and just hoping that maybe there was some accommodation that could be made. It's a strange thing that Helena suggests, because she's quite an honest person. And so for her to suggest setting up a marriage of convenience, but she's conventional. She wants grandchildren. She wants him to succeed in a high way. She's ambitious for both of her sons. She doesn't want anything measly for them. And so it's, both of them are doing battle with the sort of worldly ambition versus what they both know is basically true. And he's a good liar. He makes a good showing as someone he's not. But but maybe that's why it just bursts out of him, because he just can't do it anymore. So yeah. And AIDS, it's hard to imagine now, but AIDS, although it did help me finish this book, thinking about young people coming of age in this pandemic, and how how sort of that undue knowledge of mortality, which you really hope that kids of that age don't have to think of. So that also colors a lot of what happens here, where at this point it's a death sentence. There's no therapy for it. It's plugged into this incredibly rancid discrimination against people like Ned. So it's like multiplied that.
Yes.
And so yeah, that's my rather endless answer.
Yeah, for neither of them was there really a clear model. Both of them were so into books, but even in books or in real life, there's not a clear model of someone who was Ned's age living a really happy trajectory into adult life, and add AIDS to that, and it really did seem like a calamity. That makes me wonder about the role of books in both Ned's life, because Ned read. There's a point in the novel where Helena asked Ned, "Did you read something that maybe thought you might be gay, or did you read something that made you think it might be okay to be gay?" And Ned says, "And no, as I recall," or they jumps over it. Yeah. But I'm wondering what the role of books were for you, or not for you, but for Ned as a young person, and maybe for you too, in trying to imagine your life, how your life might unfold before coming out as a gay person.
Sure. There were no happy endings in those books, but nonetheless, Ned pursued them all. He read Brideshead Revisited. He read about the trials of Oscar Wilde, which was not a book, but it was sort of historical, of course. But even so, they were a window. And also one of the reasons there's so much music in this book is that all the crazy music of that period was also a window, with like Boy George delivering extreme gender fuck, and Jimmy Somerville singing about being a gay kid getting booted out of your home and heading to London. And so yeah, the books are important. I hope it's not too meta how much it's dealt with, but I thought about that a lot this week when in Michigan, across the country, people are making requests to take the gay LGBT books off the shelf, and rather than the librarians in Michigan, in a small town in Michigan, refuse, and so the people in the town voted to take the funding away from the library, and that for me is a brutal thing, because it's also gotten better in terms of what you can see and read. And it's not it doesn't convince you to become gay. It just helps you decide not to commit suicide, so or not to be desperately depressed, and to live a full, happy life. And so there are probably some people who are also friends with this lovely guy, Jamie Kershaw, whose birthday it is today, who is a college friend of mine, who was brilliant and funny, and became in LA an entertainment lawyer. And he said he'd say to the talent, his little formula was, "I love your work, I admire your choices." And they always loved it when he said that to him. But unfortunately, he took his life about 6 years ago. And it was, there were lots of reasons for it. But it was partly that thing that Elton John talks about in Daniel, the scars that won't heal, and so you want there to be resources for people, and it makes me angry for obvious reasons when those are taken away from a new generation. God, I'm going on.
Yeah, no. I mean, you said that part of what made it impossible for Ned to come out to Helena earlier on was that a lack of imagination, a lack of honesty was connected to a lack of imagination. He just couldn't imagine either saying that to her or what would come after and what his life might be like, and having models in literature of people who lead full, happy lives and as themselves, as fully themselves, just seems like such an important thing for young people to not be isolated and alone and desperate. So clearly Ned in the scenes preceding his coming out and sometimes after, as a kind of desperation that comes from his isolation. You mentioned a few times. By the way, I got a chat from Columbia Records, whose algorithms did recognize.
I knew it was such a beautiful version. So,
yeah, their lawyer is going to be getting in touch with your lawyer.
Yeah.
I told them you'd be defending yourself, but
bring it on, I'm ready.
The role of music in this book is really key, and it comes in and out. There are moments of great liberation that are happening when Ned and his cousin, among other people, are dancing together and realizing that they're part of some great rhythmic, beautiful thing that's happening. And then the songs stop and they come back to their harsher realities. But I'm wondering, as you were working on this book, what the role of music was, why it was so central to you. I mean, you've mentioned that a little bit, because music was was a key thing for Ned growing up, a key way of breaking down his isolation. But can you say a little bit more about why music was so key to the making and product of this book?
Sure. I always liked a lot of the Irish writers. I'm part Irish, and I loved, it's a very, very fancy model, and I was making no attempts to emulate that model, but I loved in James Joyce's Dublin, there's always the music bubbling through the text. And often they're songs that you don't know, but you still have a feel for it, augments it. And for me, one of the things, I think it's sort of impossible to capture in writing that feeling of being at one with the music. And you want to share it. Like sometimes you're driving along and you want to share it with the person next to you, but it's really almost impossible to communicate. And so I wanted to speak to that. There's so much sort of dreariness in this book. It's a tough time, and he's going through the moves that you have to make to grow up. But I wanted there to be a sort of a contrapuntal, another theme of joy, and that the music would give some of that to him. It was a promise of a better life, that feeling that he had when. And I want to read a bit of dancing, a dance scene, but it was a promise of a better life encapsulated in the music. Freddie Mercury strutting across the stage at Live Aid, saying, "I want to break free." Like, if you don't feel that, then you're not there, as it were. So yeah, I wanted it to have some joy. And I wanted to speak to his connection to music and how that's a source of power almost for him. And that's it.
I love that. Would this be a good time for you to read that
Sure.
that selection?
It's the last one, and this is about Ned's living with his cousin Sophie, who's a fashion student, and the only other thing that you need to know here is that he's made a big mistake. Just recently, he, under the influence of alcohol and after a dreadful Christmas at home, he tries to take his life, and he thankfully doesn't succeed, and he realizes he's lucky to have not succeeded. A flatmate bangs on the door of the loo, I guess they'd call it over there, and wakes him up in the bath before things have gone too far along. But so that's what's happening, and he has begun oddly to stutter a bit in the wake of that shock for him. So this is Sophie and Ned on their way out. Sophie was the one who took Ned there, telling him beforehand that there'd be a group of people assembling for one night only at an old warehouse in East London. She knew about it because her classmates were the ones transforming the warehouse into an arty S&M club. This was an acronym Ned didn't know. In the days before the internet, you could not know things like that. For the occasion, Sophie sewed them both bodysuits out of black PVC. Ned's was a little tighter than he would have liked, but Sophie said that was the right fit for this kind of garment. She said to him, "At the party, if anyone asks you if you're dominant or submissive, You'd best say your dom and say it with conviction. She made him practice. More gruff, more forceful. The warehouse was in a rough part of the Docklands, and Sophie had to turn on her proper accent and her charm to get the cabbie to take them there. As they got out of the cab, they saw a big rat waddling down the road. They took what looked like the warehouse's main door and some stairs up a story to what Ned would call the second floor, and they, the Brits, called the first. When they got to the top of the stairs, he almost turned tail. There, facing them, seated on a tiny chair, was a large woman wearing leather knickerbockers with straps going up around her exposed breasts to her broad, meaty shoulders. The only light in this anteroom came from the thin candles lodged in pierces in her flesh, slowly burning down towards her skin. One sizzled as it hit her body. Ouch. Sophie saw Ned's dismay at the whole scene. She strutted over to the woman and lit a cigarette off one of the candles. Thanks for the light, she said. Ta, ever so. Make yourself at home, the human candle said, as if welcoming them in for tea and crumpets. Through there is the labyrinth. Is there a minotaur? Ned managed to squeak out. Sophie slid open the big door ahead of them. Inside was a passage with an electric light shaped like a torch at its end. The maze was custom built from wood painted to look like stone, lit with occasional electric torches in sconces on the wall. In the dark parts, strangers would grope or gently slap them or grind against them. There was constant moaning in the maze, punctuated by occasional screams. The narrow passages would periodically open up to reveal an illuminated set piece. The first was a woman in a black PVC catsuit like theirs, with a mask covering everything but her eyes and mouth and blonde ponytail. She was using a horse crop on a hairless young man in leather chaps. In another illuminated alcove was an old man with a white beard, stuffing masses of cut fruit from a silver platter into the mouth of a young woman in a tennis outfit. She was strapped to an Eames chair and would masticate the fruit and then spit the cut of it back up, with the juices and pulp draining away down her chin and onto her formerly white-collared shirt. This, Sophie said, my friend did this. Did what? Ned said. He conceived it. But what skill was involved? Thinking, she said, props, costuming, casting. Casting? People audition for these roles? You'd be surprised. They emerged from the maze to face a small door. When they opened it, light and sound flooded through. There was an elevated dance floor, strobes pulsing, illuminating in flashes, a crowd that was rough and various, tattooed, pierced, shaved. It looked to Ned like some paintings of hell he had seen, but it also intrigued him. The music was, at any rate, familiar. They were playing mainstream tunes that had some submission or domination in them. When they got in, The Stones' Under My Thumb was on. Then came a song they could dance to, Depeche Mode singing about playing at being masters and servants. Sophie and Ned started dancing. She became Ned's mistress, his dominatrix one moment, and Ned took charge as her master the next. Then a song came on that Sophie and Ned loved. She screamed, lifted her arms, and together they exploded with delight, as yet undisciplined into dance. Their faces, until then impassive, filled with pleasure when the chorus came. Bring on the dancing horses, headless and all alone, shiver and say the words of every lie you've heard. They reached a point with each other when their moves were merging. They were no longer throwing it between them, but both moving in a loose sort of tandem. Others began to cluster around them as if drawn by some gravity in them. Ned looked around. An army of lovers they were, all pulsing to the same beat. He felt in the middle of something grand. So many of them were coming from tough places, places far tougher than Ned's. And here they were all giving what they had to the song. Sophie raised her eyebrows at Ned and threw her head at the space beyond him. Ned looked back. He expected it to be someone wearing something extreme, even for this crowd. He expected it to be someone wearing something extreme, even for this crowd, but the man wasn't, or in a way he was. This stocky guy with black, slightly curly hair had on a light blue suit and a floral tie. He looked like he'd just come from admiring the hydrangeas at the Chelsea Flower Show. He was wearing a boutonniere constructed around a single white rose. The guy could dance, but he wasn't showing off like Ned and Sophie were. Excuse me. A couple of numbers more, and Ned and Sophie exited the floor to an area near a makeshift bar. The man in the blue suit came off the floor and approached them. I saw you in the foyer lighting a cigarette. Nice move. Oh, that. She sized him up and decided he was more likely to be Ned's type than hers. She introduced herself and then her cousin. This is Ned. Seldom Edward, never Ted. Ned extended a hand. Ned Baldwin. The stranger shook it, then bowed. He actually bowed. Luciano Emanuele Carlo della Torre at your service. That's a whole lot of name, Sophie said. You can call me Luca. Luca's cheeks were round and sat high, giving him a permanently amused look. His top eyelid hung low, often hooding his blue-gray eyes. He had maybe a decade on Ned. Sophie excused herself to go congratulate the tableau-producing friend whom she'd spotted across the room. And Ned got them both drinks. Your cousin, she is very elegant, in a way that is rare in an English girl. She's part for French, Ned said. That explains it. And you, do you stutter regularly? Not usually, just recently. And you, do you always ask stutterers if they stutter regularly? Do you find that makes them feel less self-conscious about it? Luca answered Ned's pointed question with another. Don't you find people are often dying to get the chance to respond to the question everyone else is too polite to ask? I was always quite a talker. The stuttering started happening a few weeks ago after what? Ned fingered the lump on his wrist. He wanted to impress this man. He didn't think showing him his scars would help. You're not from here, Ned said, and offered him a cigarette. Luca took it between his lips and let Ned light it for him. Where am I from? Milano. I'm from Milan. God damn, this is hot. Ned said, I've never worn PVC before. I'm liquid under here. Luca cocked an eyebrow. This isn't really your scene, is it? No, not really, Ned said. My cousin, some art school friend of hers, did one of the tableaux. This is not your scene either, judging by your outfit. Oh, I could dress this part, he assured Ned. And to a certain extent, it's everyone's scene. We all dominate. We all submit. This somehow struck Ned as funny, and some of his drink shot out a nostril. He put up his hand. Sorry. What, Luca said. This party, these are children playing with knives. Ned's own close encounter with the knife came into him. What is it, Luca said. Should we get the hell out of this hole? We could go wherever you wanted. Ned checked in with Sophie on the other side of the room, and she said there were still more people to see, songs to dance to. When Luca and Ned got out into a night that had turned cold, Luca said he'd driven here and wanted to chauffeur them to the bar. Are you okay to drive? You're not so lucky-go-happy, are you? He said. His English was impeccable, much better than that of most native speakers, but sometimes his idioms were a trifle off. Ned later realized that often Luca knew very well what the correct expression was, but enjoyed playing with the words. Smell my breath, he said. I haven't had very much to drink. Ned leaned in close. Fresh as a rose, no? A daisy, Ned said. Fresh as a daisy. A rose is a nicer flower, he said, less plebeian. But one with thorns, Ned said. Ned wanted to be kissed, and Luca, after smiling for a few beats close to Ned, did so. He tasted smoky, but good. Neither of them closed their eyes. Luca pushed his head around the side of Ned's and nibbled at his earlobe, breathing warmth into his ear and massaging his neck. He whispered to Ned, I want to get that suit off you. I want it so very much. This sounded to Ned normal enough, but then Luca's imagination went in a more perverse direction. I want to leave you here, to make your way home wandering nude through the streets of London. Luca pulled abruptly away from Ned. He was good at making you want more of him. That's it.
An amazing first kiss. I mean, from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds.
It's a good comeback from a suicide attempt.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't have ended so dourly with Jamie. Happy birthday, Jamie. And also, it's your birthday, Gordy. Happy birthday to you.
Oh, thank you very much, Alec. Yeah, happy birthday, Jamie. I just love the role of Sophie. I mean, as well as Luca in this chapter, but in this book, Ned's family is so big and so wonderful. There are so many different roles to play in keeping things, safe-ish and stable and off balance. And the other character we're not going to get to hear you read about is Ned's aunt, his mother's cousin, I guess, right? With whom Ned lives in London. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about her and what role she played in the family.
She's again, I felt like I'd given Ned such a tough road to hoe. A sort of slow walk through a sewer kind of thing is what my dad would say about. So I wanted to give a bit of a grace note, and his Aunt Cordelia was the person I used for that purpose, who's a children's author. She was a fervent campaigner against nuclear disarmament. She was a brilliant woman, and a double first at Cambridge back when women were very rare there. And so she is a support for him, and makes his arrival in London just a beautiful thing. So I want to talk about the conscience of the Anglos and of the sort of this family having a side to it that is very harsh and very tough, and you can't be wet. Sort of Kipling's version of Englishness. And then I wanted to have a side that was more the Bloomsbury group's off-kilter progressive side of Englishness, not progressive enough, still part of the imperial system. But so that's what she's doing there. And I hope a good character in her own right, but she also represents that sort of thing.
She's a brilliant character. And in addition to that kind of tough or conservative and liberal sort of sides of the family, there's also this question in the book of whether their people are warriors or shopkeepers, sure. Which maybe is another way of framing, framing the same question. And I forget who it was.
Napoleon,
right?
Dissed the English as a nation of shopkeepers, and Helena is like, well, he got to see exactly what sort of shopkeepers we were at Waterloo and at the Battle of Trafalgar. So she has that residual English pride, but she's coming to grips with the fact that she's been so lucky, so privileged. Yes. And she meets the descendant of an Eastern European shtetl whose whole civilization was basically destroyed. And she realizes that she has to rethink some of her knee-jerk pride in her Englishness. And she's a history teacher, so she's not idiotic about the cost of empire for others. So yes. that's part of what she's trying to come to grips with, although she gives it back to Napoleon on that issue. So.
Yes, she does. I just glanced at the clock and I see we're actually it's advanced more than I had thought it would by this time. But I see we have a couple of questions from the audience, and I want to encourage other people to send them in through the chat function there. Let's see. One person asks, says there's a lot of focus on the mother-son relationship in the book. What did your own mother say about that characterization in the book when she read it?
Sure. I mean, it's fiction, this book, and I needed to have some tension happening. And so Helena's tougher than my own mother is, and the book is dedicated not just to David, but to both my parents. But I wanted to speak about how tough it was for families like this at that point. Not tough financially; they're well positioned on that, but in other ways that now we would think are crazy. I think that for a family like this now, it would be very strange if they took it as people still have these wretched times coming of age with these issues all over everywhere. But for a family like this, it would be strange if they were still struggling this way. So yeah, my parents both read it and were big people about it's a nightmare to have autobiographical fiction because they take all the shiny objects and they make them their own, and you're reading it, you're like, well, that's the family story, but they got it a little wrong, and that's sort of like someone, but it's not, and that never happened, And so I admired how they handled this thing, which is fiction and which departs hugely from the reality, but tries to speak the truth about what this kind of thing was like.
Alec, I'd like to know a little bit more about what it's like writing fiction after decades as a journalist, where you don't ever write anything that isn't both true and verifiable. Suddenly to have that leash cut and to be able to, to run free, with the exception of your conscience, which I imagine binds you, and the complications you've just described if you're writing about stories that other people will recognize and so forth. But what is it like to write and not have to be literally writing the truth, but just seeking for the literary truth?
Fair enough. Yeah, my first job in journalism was as a fact checker, and so I value that role very much so. And they always catch things in my stories that when they're doing it. But I sure didn't miss having a fact checker call me up and say, actually, Tottenham Court Road doesn't. I mean, actually, that's something I did try and get right, is the geography of London. But it was terrifying because I'd taken all these baby steps to learn how to do things journalistically. And so now you've got a blank page and you don't have those rules. You do have things like we write in scenes, Gordy, and we quote things that add stuff rather than just, but still, so I went to workshops at Stanford and at Banff and Breadloaf, and I tried to learn to read the books that I loved as a writer rather than to read them as just a reader. So at Stanford, there's this amazing Wayne Gretzky of a reader named Nancy Packer, who looked at the stories of Chekhov and explained why she thought they worked. So, yeah. Hi, Cheryl.
Hey, gentlemen.
Hi, Cheryl.
Do we have any more questions or?
We do have one more question.
Great.
And it's a very straightforward one. So if we have a moment, I'll ask it. And it's from someone in the audience who asks how Alec ended up in Oakland.
Yes, my fellow now husband, David, got a job offer down here to help set up what will probably be one of the last things of its kind, a very highly automated printing plant for the Chronicle. and I was working at the CBC.
Wait, what's printing, Alec? Could you explain?
Yeah. So yeah. And so we took a flyer and came down here, and with the climate and the people we met, we miss so much about Canada, and living here during the political climate of the last few years has been a challenge, but we also just love it here. So, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everyone,
Cheryl.
for coming, and thank you, Book Passage. Cheryl.
Thank you, Gordy. Happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
Alec and Gordy, that was incredible. We got a twofer. We had a reading and a musical performance. So thank you so much. We're going to book you for some musical shows. That was
I have
great,
no
Alec.
doubt. I have no doubt.
Thank you, gentlemen. That was fabulous. This is the book, All That Shimmers. We love this book at Book Passage. We highly recommend it. We still have a number of weeks left of summer. We call it a great summer read, but it's also a great read for any time. So please come and purchase your books from Book Passage. We are so happy to offer you these free programs, free online, free events in the store. And we can do that because you purchase your books at Book Passage. So support independent bookstores. They are such an important part of the community. And again, for all the viewers out there, thanks for spending the hour with us. And, we hope to see you again. We love our customers. We love our Book Passage community. Buy the book, and we'll see you next time. Good night.
Thanks,
Good night.
Cheryl.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, Alec.
Bye. Thank you.